Modest Mussorgsky. He's a figure in Russian music who has always fascinated me. This intensely individual voice, his determination to create a sound that was undeniably Russian. We've got a lot here about him.
We do.
It seems he really was an innovator, someone who wanted to go his own way. So today, I'm hoping we can, well, dive into that.
So good.
He's considered, and rightly so, an innovator of Russian music in the Romantic period. And get this, he worked in deliberate defiance of the established conventions of Western music. Quite something, eh?
Oh, it is. Formidable creative power and some real, struggles in his personal life. That desire to forge a uniquely Russian musical identity, it really drove him. And understanding this, it's key to understanding his music. You see, the Romantic period, well, it was all about emotion, individual expression, and often a link to national identity. So his aims, they were very much of the time, but with that specific Russian twist, of course.
All right, let's go back to the beginning then. His background. He came from, an aristocratic family, one with a long lineage. It's the kind of start you'd think that would lead to a pretty comfortable life.
That's right, a family of wealth and privilege, landowners, centuries of history behind them. And as was the tradition, his early life included military service. He was enrolled in the cadet school of the Guards. This structured environment, it's almost the opposite of the path he'd end up taking.
And there's something else about this period. It's suggested that his time in the military might have been the start of his problems with alcohol. It's kind of humanizing, you know what I mean? The idea that even with such a good start, there can be, well, difficulties.
Very much so. It reminds us that everyone has their struggles. The sources do hint at this connection. It gives us a peek into how complex his story is. This vulnerability, hidden beneath a noble upbringing, it makes his later artistic rebellion so much more interesting.
Let's move on then. His early musical encounters. It seems that meeting Alexander Dargometsky was, well, it was a turning point. Really immersed him in Russian cultural life.
Oh, absolutely. Dargometsky was a major composer. And, he had this interest in Russian themes and a naturalistic approach to vocal composition. His influence on Mussorgsky was, well, huge. He created this environment, a space where Mussorgsky could really engage with Russian culture and explore these musical concepts that were, let's say, tapping into this growing sense of nationalism. It was a conscious shift away from those purely Western European models that were so dominant. Back then, you see, composers followed these strict rules of harmony and form. They were established in, places like Germany and Italy. But Russian nationalists, like Dargometsky, they wanted to break free. They wanted their own distinct musical language.
And then there's Mily Balakirov. He seems to have been very influential, though maybe a bit complicated, in Mussorgsky's development. He guided him, in understanding musical form through the study of composers like Beethoven and Kuchka. There's a quote here, actually, where Balakirov says he couldn't teach harmony, but he could explain form. That's quite something, isn't it?
It certainly is. It reveals a lot about Balakirov's approach to teaching. A central figure in the nationalist movement, strong personality. He had a lot of influence on the younger composers in his circle. This emphasis on form, perhaps overlooking traditional harmony instruction, it points to a different kind of philosophy, one based on analyzing music and studying the greats. Form, think of it like the architecture of a piece, the structure. Sonata form or theme and variations, that kind of thing. Balakirov's goal, well, it was to cultivate a distinctly Russian style, drawing on folk melodies, national themes. And he saw in Mussorgsky the potential to contribute to that.
Which leads us to the five. They're also known as the Kuchka. Mussorgsky was a key member of this group, these nationalist composers. Interestingly, the material says that he initially wanted Balakirov's approval, but later, his own artistic journey, it diverged. Oh, and he had a nickname in the group, Humor. Gives you a glimpse into his character, doesn't it?
It does. The five were united by this mission to create an authentically Russian musical voice. And they were deliberately rejecting what they saw as the dominance of Western European traditions. Balakirov, he was the guiding force at first. But as Mussorgsky grew as a composer, his own vision started to come through, sometimes leading to a bit of friction, moving away from Balakirov's, let's say, more controlling guidance. The nickname Humor, it suggests, well, a certain wit, maybe a more lighthearted, spontaneous side to him, perhaps contrasting with the more serious, members of the group.
The aim was so clear, to establish a Russian musical identity, to defy those Western conventions. A powerful thing for a group of artists to do.
A bold movement, for sure. They wanted to bring elements of Russian folk music, history, culture into their compositions to create a sound that was undeniably their own. This rejection of the norm, it was key to who they were as artists, a driving force behind everything they created.
This yearning for a Russian voice, it connects to Mussorgsky's embrace of artistic realism, and the sources say he was influenced by thinkers like Chernyshevsky. What did this mean for his music?
Well, artistic realism in this case meant a commitment to portraying life as it was, no idealization, no romantic flourishes. Mussorgsky, he wanted to depict ordinary people, their struggles, the realities of Russian life, all through his music. This philosophy, it led him to reject those rigid musical forms. He saw them as artificial, not representative of life's natural flow. He wanted something direct, truthful in his musical expression.
And we see this in some of his most famous works, like the opera Boris Godunov, the tone poem Night on Bald Mountain, and the piano suite Pictures at an Exhibition. All of these are mentioned as embodying this nationalistic, realistic approach. They draw inspiration from Russian history, Russian folklore, and other national themes.
Exactly. Boris Godunov, for example, it focuses on a tumultuous time in Russian history. And the characters, they come from all walks of life. Night on Bald Mountain, it's based on Russian folklore and superstitions. It creates this, well, this vivid and often quite unsettling soundscape. And Pictures at an Exhibition, inspired by the art of his friend Victor Hartmann, it evokes these scenes, these characters so directly, so powerfully. These works, they show his dedication to finding a musical expression for Russian subjects and sensibilities. You see, unlike the more formal harmonic progressions in, Western European music, Mussorgsky, he used modal scales, unexpected chord changes. It created this raw, more grounded sound, similar to Russian folk melodies. And then if you listen to the vocal lines in Boris Godunov, they're stark, almost declamatory. They prioritize natural speech over those, typical operatic melodies. It's the realistic portrayal of character in its purest form.
But things take a turn when we look at his personal life. He struggled with alcohol, and it seems this got worse after his mother died in 1865. The material also mentions a view from that time that heavy drinking was linked to those who opposed the establishment. It's a troubling but fascinating detail.
It is. His battles with alcohol were serious, and without a doubt, they had a huge impact on his life and work. This idea that it was a form of rebellion, of going against societal norms, well, it adds another dimension. It helps us understand that era, the culture Mussorgsky lived in. It suggests that his personal struggles, they might have been tied to the bigger social and political currents of the time, maybe even a manifestation of that unconventional spirit, something that went beyond his music.
And yet, even with these challenges, he kept creating. The song Cycle Sunless, the Kovanshina Prelude, even Pictures at an Exhibition, all came later. It shows how strong that creative drive was, even with so much difficulty in his life.
It truly does. Even amidst all that turmoil, his dedication to his artistic vision never wavered. These later works, they show a deepening of his expressive language, a continued exploration of themes that really resonated with him. The contrast between his struggles and his creativity, it's striking. It underlines the deep connection between his life and his art.
The end of his life, though, seems to have been marked by isolation and decline. The Balakarita circle falling apart, losing friends, and then being dismissed from civil service in 1880. Unreliable, they said. It led to destitution. It's a pretty bleak picture.
It must have been devastating to have those musical circles, the ones that had been such a part of his life, break apart. Losing those connections, the growing instability, it all took its toll. And then losing his job, that was his source of income, however small. It made everything worse, left him vulnerable and alone.
And then a very sad premature end. Seizures, delirium tremens. He died just after his 42nd birthday. Ilya Repin's famous portrait, the one painted in those final days, it's quite poignant.
It is. Repin's portrait, it captures Mussorgsky's physical and emotional state so starkly, so intimately. It reminds us of the cost of his struggles, the tragedy of his life cut short. You look at his eyes, even in his weakened state, and it's deeply moving.
It's almost like a testament to him that his legacy has been, reclaimed. At first, his music was mainly known through revisions by composers like Rimsky-Korsakov. But now, the material emphasizes there's this appreciation for his most important compositions in their original forms. That's a big change.
It is. While Rimsky-Korsakov and others like him, they helped bring Mussorgsky's music to a wider audience early on, they had a tendency to, smooth over some of his more unconventional ideas, the harmonies, the melodies. But now we appreciate those original scores. We hear his music as he intended it, with all its, sometimes raw power. And this has led to a deeper understanding of how innovative he was, how much he influenced composers who came after him. For example, Rimsky-Korsakov often changed the harmonies in Mussorgsky's more modal passages. He replaced them with, more conventional Western harmonies. But if you listen to the originals, you hear this stark, almost ancient quality. And that was central to Mussorgsky's vision, to creating a truly Russian sound.
And this is the curious thing about the spelling of his name. The controversy, the possible reasons behind it may be connected to that Russian word for rubbish, and his own, well, his apparent amusement about it, and then all the different pronunciations. It's like even his identity has been debated.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The G, perhaps it was added to, well, separate his name from that word, Musor. And the fact that he seemed to find it funny, it shows self-awareness, maybe even a bit of defiance. And then the pronunciation shifting from the first syllable, as it was in Russian, to the second, as it's often done in the West, well, it reflects how his music has traveled across cultures, how names, identities can change through those exchanges.
It's interesting to learn that Mussorgsky and the Five were considered extremist by the emperor and the court. Adds another layer to their rebellion, gives us a better understanding of the world they were working in.
It really shows how radical they were. Their unwavering commitment to a Russian sound, their rejection of those Western conventions, their focus on their own national themes, it was seen as a threat. And this probably contributed to the difficulties Mussorgsky faced getting recognition, finding consistent support for his groundbreaking work.
Well, as we come to the end of our deep dive, we've explored the life and music of Modest Mussorgsky, a composer who, more than anything, wanted to create a Russian musical voice, one deeply rooted in his culture and history. A true innovator, he faced tremendous personal challenges. And there's a contrast, isn't there, between his desire to capture the essence of Russian life in his music and the struggles that defined his own life.
Absolutely. His legacy is complex. It's a powerful reminder of his artistic vision and the immense obstacles he faced throughout his life. He poured his heart and soul into creating music that was authentically Russian. And despite everything, his unique and powerful voice continues to resonate with us today.
It really does make you think. Given his vision, his originality, what if his circumstances had been different? What other incredible music might he have created if he'd been spared the struggles that consumed him? A thought to ponder until our next exploration.